Harris, a scruffy vagabond thief, awakens to find a young girl on top of him. His first instinct is to check his pouch of gold, which now contains only a single coin. He accuses the girl of stealing his money, pointing out that he had 4 gold coins to start with. The girl weakly tries to defend herself but maintains that she didn't steal a thing. When Harris asks her what happened to his money, she replies that he used it to buy her. Harris has her repeat what she just said and examines her small, frail, and malnourished body. If she really is a slave, she's the worst possible kind. Harris digs deep and tries to recall what happened the previous day. It was the day of the capital's annual festival. He had just returned from a dungeon with his trading company, and they were cashing in their loot. The total was 25 gold coins, more than enough for everyone to share. They all agreed to drink and celebrate the occasion, but when they tried to invite Harris to join them, he turned them down and left. Harris's antisocial tendencies have earned him quite a poor reputation. One even calls him a thief. Harris visits a different tavern alone and places an order at the counter. Harris' real class is a scout. He is proficient in detecting and disarming traps, lockpicking, identifying items, and keeping an eye out for enemies. It is not a combat role in the slightest. Harris has no qualms about drinking. He prefers not to drink with that specific group of people. He would have gone anyway if he had a chance with either Ilya or Aza, but he knows that neither of them would go out with a filthy person like him. When the waitress returns with Harris' order, he tries hitting on her. She is receptive to his advances at first, but when she sees his attire indicative of him being a thief, she claims to have an extra shift. Harris begrudgingly finishes his drink and leaves without getting any change, knowing that he was rejected because of his looks. He decides to buy a female escort instead. Harris drops by a high-class escort house, but the bouncer denies him entry and points him in the opposite direction, which features similar shops that suit him better. Harris angrily grabs the bouncer by the collar, claiming that he has the gold to pay. The bouncer kicks Harris in the stomach and orders him to leave. Even if he had the money to pay, he wouldn't be welcome at their establishment. While fireworks roar to life to celebrate the capital's annual festival, Harris stumbles around in a drunken stupor, causing a minor disturbance with some civilians and a shopkeeper. Harris's head starts spinning. A massive headache causes him to spiral. Despite living in a city with thousands of people, he doesn't feel welcome anywhere. He accidentally trips on someone's foot, the foot of a slave girl in chains. Hold on. If you guys are loving this video, make sure to comment, "We are loving it," because that is how I get to know that. Now, getting back to the story. Harris finally remembers that he was so wasted that he bought a slave girl at the market. He observes the girl again. His earlier assessment was correct. She is clearly malnourished and in no physical condition to do anything a slave would usually do. Harris mourns the 3 gold he spent on her, which he could have spent gambling or fooling around instead. He asks her to lead him back to the slave market, where he asks the slave merchant from last night for a refund. The merchant agrees, but he can only offer Harris 10 silver coins, a fifth of the original price. He explains that 10 silver coins are all that the girl is worth. It costs money to maintain slaves, and he'd still have to find a way to sell them to the show house. The show house is a place where children are trapped in an arena with an ogre, all for the amusement of high-paying customers. The merchant asks Harris what he wants to do. Harris chooses to keep the girl. He brings her to the park and has her drink water from the fountain. The girl thanks him for the water, but moments later, her stomach grumbles. Mortified, she lowers her head and profusely apologizes. Harris hands her a piece of food, which she hesitates to accept. He watches as she wolfs down the piece of meat as though it were the best meal in the world. Indeed, perhaps at this point, it was the greatest thing she had ever eaten. Harris decides that he has no choice but to keep her. He thinks to himself that he can at least feed and dress her up into a proper lady. He asks the girl for her name, and she replies, Tina. Harris tells her that from now on, he is her master. Harris has his work cut out for him. He brings Tina across the city, and some people periodically stare at them. They arrive at the temple to meet Ilya, who wishes that he had stayed last night to celebrate. Ilya is a priestess devoted to the temple, and she can often be found praying and healing others. She asks Harris what she can do for him, and he asks her to heal Tina's wounds. He is concerned about her external wounds and scars, but he is especially worried about her bones, given how awkwardly she walks. Ilya leans in and openly accuses Harris of hurting Tina. Whispers also begin to circulate around the temple, no doubt speaking ill of Harris. Ilya, explicitly attacking him like this, answers a few questions Harris had about her character. Tina suddenly shouts that Ilya and everyone else are wrong. She swears that Harris would never do such a thing to her, vouching for his good character. She insists he is the kindest person she knows. Ilya lowers her head and apologizes to Harris for accusing him of such a heinous crime. She takes Tina by the hand and leads her deeper into the inner sanctum. Ilya makes conversation as she carefully bathes Tina's body prior to healing it. The cold water stings her shallow wounds and whiplashes, but Ilya asks her to bear with it for now. Ilya apologizes to Tina again for how she unfairly treated Harris because of his appearance and occupation. She asks Tina how she ended up with Harris to begin with. Tina recounts how her family was attacked by monsters when she was a child. She ended up being sold to another family where she was severely beaten and whipped almost daily. The scars on her back are proof of what she endured. However, despite this troubled past, Tina looks forward to the future, knowing that a kind master has finally bought her. Ilya embraces Tina from behind, promising that her pure, childlike soul will always be under the watchful eye of God. Meanwhile, Harris thinks about how Tina stood up for him earlier. Though he is happy she did, he finds her overly trusting nature a little problematic. Not long after, Ilya returns with Tina, now fresh as a daisy. Ilya tells Harris all about Tina's troubled past and the hardships she had to endure. She asks him to take good care of her. Harris promises too, though he does not reveal that he has ulterior motives. Ilya's eyes are now open to how nice a guy Harris is. She retrieves something from her robe and gives it to Harris. It is still warm to the touch. Harris has obtained the temple's friendship emblem, which allows him to receive treatment from any temple for free. Ordinarily is worth 100 gold coins, but Ilya is giving it to him out of gratitude because of their encounter earlier. She was bluntly reminded never to judge someone by their looks, remarking that there are good people among those who can pick locks. With their business concluded, Harris prepares for the long journey home, a 7-day march. He asks Tina how her leg is, and she replies that it's as good as new. She asks in turn what kind of work he does, and he explains that he is an adventurer willing to do any odd jobs for cash. Tina is impressed that Harris seems to be able to do anything, though Harris tells her that he's just doing simple work. She spots the short sword sheathed on his hip, and he explains that he uses it sometimes. With the sun starting to set, Harris prepares to set up camp, but his instincts scream that something dangerous is nearby. He grabs Tina and hides her out of plain sight. Harris's decision to take a shortcut has backfired. He's blundered right into the path of 3 vicious orcs. Harris estimates that there is still a good distance between him and the enemy, and he considers waiting for them to pass. However, the orc's nostrils flare up as it starts sniffing the air. It can sense that 1 man and 1 small female child are nearby, and it doesn't plan on throwing them a party. Harris realizes the danger he is in. He throws Tina over his shoulder and starts running as fast as he can. Ordinarily, Harris would be able to handle some orcs, but he can tell that the group he encountered is especially bloodthirsty. It wouldn't be hard for them to track him down and grind his bones into dust. The physical strain of carrying another person while running catches up to Harris. Tina, realizing this, suggests that he leave her behind. The orcs will catch up to them at this rate, but if she were to be left behind, then Harris would be able to get away. Harris tells her not to think of something so foolish, but it's all she can think about. She doesn't want a repeat of what happened to her father. Harris tells her that he has no intention of dying. He wasn't running away blindly either. He chose a suitable location for an ambush. Even though he isn't a combat specialist, he's still a thief. And what do thieves do best? They fight dirty, and that's exactly what Harris intends to do. The 3 orcs track Harris down to his last known location. The leader catches Tina's scent, and they spot her dress fluttering behind a tree. However, once there, they discover nothing but a dress dangling from a branch. Suddenly, a small snare trap snags on the orc's leg. His friends do nothing but point and laugh at him, and that's how you know that they're best friends. However, when a steel wire wraps itself around the orc's neck, his friends stop laughing. The orc is sent tumbling down, and a wooden stake impales his chest. When the 2 orcs see the sharpened wood sticking out of their friend's chest, they belatedly realize the danger they are in. From out of the shadows, Harris stabs a second orc in the neck, killing it nearly instantly. The 3rd orc, dumbfounded, starts fleeing, left and right with his club, intending to deprive Harris of any ambush spots. The orc's nose leads into a shallow cave, but after taking 2 steps toward it, a small rock hits him on the back of his head. The orc wildly swings behind him, only to hit nothing but cold air. More and more rocks start falling out of sight, occasionally striking the orc on hardened surfaces. The orc's senses are overwhelmed by the sound and echoes of falling stones. Harris throws a final stone that causes the orc to look forward, and the orc realizes the deception too late. Harris stabs him through his skull, and with a simple twist, the orc falls just as easily as his brothers did. Harris calls for Tina to come out. She emerges from within the cave, draped in Harris' own cloak. He's glad that she's safe and instructs her to quickly put on her clothes again. Under the light of a waxing moon, Harris and Tina set up camp. Tina commends Harris for how well he fought earlier, though he explains that had it been a head-on fight, he would have been crushed. Orcs have an acute sense of smell, but in exchange, they have poor eyesight. Harris' main challenge wasn't to find a blind spot, but to find an angle to kill the first orc, which trivialized the rest of the fight. Harris credits Tina for their victory. If it hadn't been for her dress, he wouldn't have been able to distract the orc. Tina blushes, admitting that she didn't know how to react when he told her to remove her clothes earlier. Harris hands her some food and tells her to get some sleep. After being on the road for a week, Harris and Tina arrive at the town of Norn. After a short walk, Harris brings Tina to his house, a quaint two-story homestead near the edge of a forest. After showing her inside, Harris quickly removes his gear and leaves to run some errands. He instructs Tina to watch the house while he is away, warning her not to touch a certain chest in the room. Harris drops by the Adventurers Guild and accepts a certificate of completion for his earlier dungeon clear. He also drops his small pouch of orc gear, hoping to claim a reward for their deaths. The receptionist, Jonathan, is surprised that Harris was able to take them on, but Harris turns down any further monster hunting quests. Afterwards, Harris visits Back's repair shop and asks him to fix up some old earrings. Back is willing to do it, but asks why Harris brought in accessories all of a sudden. Harris rebuffs his attempts to dig up more information, and Back charges him 3 copper coins for the job. Back finds it a shame that he can't fix Harris' personality and tells Harris to pick it up tomorrow. Upon returning home, Harris discovers that his house is clean and spotless. There isn't a single speck of dust that he can cartoonishly run his finger across. Tina fears that she did something unwarranted, but Harris reassures her that he was just surprised. Tina happily offers Harris a seat so that she can serve him his meal. She offers him a stew she made using leftover meat from their trip and some herbs from the back garden. Harris wasn't even aware that he had a garden. He always thought they were weeds. Harris takes a big bite and commends Tina on her cooking. He then encourages her to sit down and eat with him. Tina doesn't consider herself worthy of eating at the same table as him, but Harris insists that she does, and while she's at it, he wants a second bowl. After stuffing themselves, Tina asks Harris if he'd like to rest in bed. Harris takes a look at his condition and remarks that he needs a bath first. Tina happily goes about drawing a bath for him. Harris sits back and relaxes. A few minutes later, Tina informs him that the bath is ready. Harris heads out back and finds a hot tub of water and foamy soap. He hears Tina's voice again, offering to wash his back. Harris whips his head back in response. When he sees Tina, he becomes immensely disappointed. Tina asks him if she is bothering him somehow, but Harris just makes a mental note to feed her a bit more later. Harris quickly takes off his clothes and allows Tina to wash his back. She recounts how Elia washed her back at the temple and how she ended up wanting to wash his back too. Harris, upon realizing that Elia washed Tina's back, starts having all sorts of fantasies about Elia washing his. However, just as things are about to get spicy, Harris recalls Tina's soft yet strong hands, which she uses to maintain a firm grip on her mace as she bashes in the heads of the undead. He suddenly loses his urges and encourages Tina to take a bath after him as well. That evening, Tina wears one of Harris' old shirts, but the size is so big that it seems like she's wearing a dress. She thanks him for the garment regardless. When Harris says that it is time to sleep, Tina walks in the opposite direction and makes a small nest for herself in the kitchen. Harris asks her what she's doing, and she asks if she should sleep in the barn instead. Harris brings Tina to his room, but she is worried about being in the same bed as him due to her status as a slave. Harris believes he'd be in more trouble if she got sick from the cold. The matter isn't up for discussion, and he tosses her a blanket. Tina thanks him for the blanket, and Harris climbs into bed. She is worried that Harris doesn't seem to use blankets, and he explains that that single blanket is all he has. Tina scolds him in turn, even though Harris claims he slept under worse conditions while inside dungeons. However, Tina insists on giving Harris the blanket. She knows how much trouble he's been through these past few days, and she wants to ensure that, at the very least, he gets a good night's rest in his own home. Harris reassures her that he had plenty of time to relax, thanks to all the heavy lifting she did inside the house. Tina is thankful for the compliment, though she admits that her sewing skills aren't up to standard. She also laments that as a slave, no one will ever take her as a wife. Harris tells her that she doesn't have to do things perfectly right away, remarking that she could always go to a tailor if she can't make clothes herself. Tina drapes the blanket around Harris while keeping a small section of it to herself. Harris remarks that he'll have to go shopping tomorrow, and Tina offers to run the errands in his stead. Not long after, Tina falls asleep, and Harris gets the good night's rest he was promised. He wishes her a good night, not knowing that she was still awake all along. The next day, Harris ends up accompanying Tina to the city. Tina apologizes for having him come along in the end, but he acknowledges that he was also at fault. He hadn't realized that Tina was illiterate and thus did not know how to read the map he made for her. To cheer her up, Harris tells her that she just has to work on the things she doesn't know how to do little by little. Harris shows Tina where to go using the map, and they go their separate ways to conduct their own errands. However, Harris is too worried to leave Tina alone and keeps a close eye on her in secret. Tina wanders around in an almost bewildered state until she manages to find the shop on the map. The shopkeeper, Bertha, heads out to greet Tina and sees the slave collar on her neck. When she learns that Tina is working under Harris, her eyes quickly narrow with suspicion. Bertha places a caring hand on Tina's shoulder and asks her about her current living conditions. Tina recounts how she was attacked by orcs on her way to Norn. Bertha is beyond relieved that she managed to survive, but is even more surprised to learn that Harris fought off the orcs. Tina mimics how Harris acted right before he fought the orcs as well, and Harris covers his face in shame. Tina continues to sing his praises, even though Harris would prefer it if she didn't. She tells Bertha all about how Harris fed her, clothed her, and showed concern for her general well-being. Hearing this, Bertha changes her mind about Harris. Knowing that Harris is a drunkard, Bertha realizes she'll need to sell Tina some stronger seasoning. She asks Tina how much money she has, and Tina shows her the small pouch of coins. Bertha remarks that the money is more than enough. Harris most likely wants to feed Tina and bring her back to a healthier weight. To illustrate this, Bertha puts her fingers around Tina's wrist and whispers into Tina's ear that once she has a bit of meat on her, she'll be even more attractive than before. Bertha gives Tina a diet plan while Harris wonders what on God's green earth they're talking about. Seeing that there was no need to worry, Harris goes about doing his own errands. He returns to Back, who has finished repairing the earring he brought in the day before. A few moments later, Tina also enters the shop. Harris is happy to see that she didn't get lost. Bax motions for Tina to come to him and affixes the repaired earring to her ear. Sensing that something is missing, Back reaches under the counter and gives Tina a flowy white dress. He explains that he's been having trouble finding a buyer and remarks that it's almost as if the dress was waiting for her. Harris admits that Tina looks good and grumbles that Bax should be thanking him for taking bad merchandise off his hands. Bax defends his actions, pointing out that it doesn't hurt to have Tina look good to make Harris look good too. He warns and reminds Harris that he is no longer living alone, and if he isn't careful, he'll run out of money. Tina is worried that she can't wear such expensive things, but Back tells her not to think about it. He then directs Harris to the Adventurers Guild, where Jonathan has been looking pale all morning. Following his advice, Harris heads to the Adventurers Guild, where Jonathan is all too happy to see him. Jonathan tells Harris about a rookie party that hasn't returned from a dungeon excursion after a whole day, and a rescue party is being put together. Find them. Jonathan fears that the rookie party likely got carried away. The dungeon they went into is very complicated and easy to get lost in if one isn't careful. It isn't impossible to be completely wiped out. However, veteran adventurers are in short supply, and that's when Jonathan remembers Harris. A woman approaches them and asks if she can join their rescue party. The next morning, Harris sets out on his rescue mission while a worried Tina sees him off and prays for his safe return. Harris is one of several other adventurers who have joined the rescue party. The others seem quite optimistic about getting this quest over with as fast as possible. The woman from before chastises them for acting rather laid back, reminding them that they're not on a field trip. She reintroduces herself as Gina. The heavily armored youth is named Kampa, while the other two men are Zoe and Ted, respectively. Kampa politely bows his head as a show of respect before heading inside. Harris performs a final check. Their objective is to search for the rookie party that was expected to have gotten lost. All they'll be doing is sweeping the first floor. Ted asks why they aren't going to the second floor, and Harris replies that if the rookie somehow made it to the second floor, they are most likely dead. The second floor is dangerous as it is filled with ogres, trolls, and monsters from the fourth floor. Zoe and Ted react rather furtively, and Harris instantly deduces that none of them have made it to the fourth floor. The fourth floor is home to monsters that even seasoned veterans can get killed by, and Harris begins considering turning around immediately after scouring the first floor. Gina, unwilling to let it end here, claims that she can use fourth-tier magic. Hold on. If you guys are loving this video, make sure to comment, "We are loving it," because that is how I get to know that. Now, getting back to the story. She insists on searching the entirety of the second floor as well. It is their job. The vanguard, led by Kampa, easily cleaves through goblins that they encounter. Based on their numbers, Harris senses that the rookie party could very well have been wiped out here. The only thing that remains to be seen is Gina's magical abilities. She catches Harris staring at her, and he remarks that they should still be on their guard. Kampa spots a treasure chest out in the open. Ted inspects the chest and sees no signs of it being tampered with or opened. It's Harris' turn. He brings out his lock-picking tools and, in a matter of seconds, opens the chest. Jenna is impressed that Harris finished so quickly. Harris quips back that he does this for a living, so it is to be expected. The others jokingly say that they should properly lock their doors, but Jen reminds them that they're being rude to a skilled scout. Kampa finds it odd that such an obvious treasure chest was untouched, and he wonders if the rookie party ignored the first floor completely and went straight to the second floor. They discuss heading down to the second floor as well, and Harris decides to do just that. However, shortly after descending into the second floor, Ted spots something in the distance: demon wolves. They haven't noticed them, but they'll have to fight their way out if they want to continue. Kampa suggests that Juna's 4th level magic should be enough to wipe them out in one shot. Harris echoes his sentiment. Juna feels a bit pressured to deliver and tells them all not to get their hopes up too much. After a brief incantation, she casts Ice Break, sending a huge shard of ice hurtling toward the wolves. While the others are impressed, Harris isn't. The demon wolves, who are very much not dead, attack Ted, Zoe, and Kampa. They immediately form ranks, but one wolf slips above their falling ranks. Thanks to some cleverness on Harris' part, he sets one of the demon wolves on fire, then disposes of the rest. Kampa is impressed that Harris managed to handle wolves with ease, but he credits his prior experience with handling their weaknesses and Gina's earlier Ice Break attack. However, he questions her decision to use Ice Break in the first place. Despite being 4th level magic, Ice attribute magic is extremely ineffective against demon wolves. She could have used a simple Firebolt spell and been done with it. Seeing no way out of this, Gina admits that the only offensive attribute magic she can use is Ice. She tries to end the conversation and storms off, but ends up bumping into Kampa. Harris comes forward to see what's going on, and that's when everyone discovers the mangled corpses of the rookie party, just as they had feared. The rookie party was dead before they even arrived. Harris had a hunch, but he didn't think it would be this bad. Fortunately, enough of their corpses remain for Harris to identify who is who. However, Gina is unable to stomach the grisly scene and excuses herself to throw up. Harris now has to make sure that these bodies really are those of the rookie party, but neither Zoe nor Ted is willing to help. It's just him and Kampa. The others believe that the rookie adventurers died from the demon wolf attacks, but Harris astutely observes that the wounds are too few to be the work of wolves. The wolves most likely just chewed up their bodies afterwards. Harris takes a closer look at their bodies and discovers 2 bite punctures on one of their wrists. Before he can draw any conclusions, Kampa informs him that he's finished checking the other bodies. After wrapping up the rest of their work, they notice that Jana hasn't returned. Jana is embarrassed over being reduced to such a state, even though she was lecturing the others earlier. Before she can return to the group, a snake drops down in front of her, and she screams. Harris and the others are alerted to the danger. When they catch up to Gina, they discover a mass of black-skinned ice snakes. Harris realizes that they must have been the ones who killed the rookie adventurers. A few snakes slither into Ted, Zoe, and Kampa's armor, and they flee in a panic. Harris sees Gina frozen in place and has no choice but to pick her up. They make a break for the exit, and upon making it out, they discover that their 3 vanguards have already left. Jenna thanks him for the help but worries about his injuries too. Harris has a few bite marks on his neck, but since he's familiar with the poison, he knows that it won't be serious for a few hours. Suddenly, Jenna feels something squirming inside her clothes. A snake has managed to slither its way inside her robes. Harris decisively lifts her robes up, causing the snake to fall down, but also causing Janet to slap him. It's a double-edged sword. Gina apologizes for slapping him, though Harris stabs the snake, killing it. His main problem now is the poison. Unfortunately, even though he has an antidote with him, Jenna does not. She had been overly relying on the priests and her party to prepare one in advance. Harris examines her injuries and discovers several bite marks on her body, with some dangerously close to her heart. If he doesn't give her the antidote now, she'll be dead before they even reach Norn. Harris says he has an antidote, but it is only enough for one person. He tells her that if he returns to Norn without drinking it, his treatment costs will be immense. He's willing to give the antidote to her if she promises to pay for his treatment, and she agrees. Using an oath stone, Janet swears to pay Harris the amount she owes. After Janet consumes the antidote, Harris tells her to head back to the city while he goes to a temple to get treated. Jenna says that she is indebted to him, but he remarks that he's already gotten his payment. When Harris finally returns home, Tina is there to welcome him back. Harris is surprised that she's up this early, but it's because Tina was worried that he didn't return after dark. She's concerned that he may be injured, and he tells her that he stopped by the temple first before coming home. This only fans Tina's fears that Harris was so injured he had to get healed, but he swears that he only had a few scratches. Tina is relieved, but Harris's stomach interrupts her. He had completely forgotten to eat. Tina offers to make him something, but she quickly realizes that they're out of ingredients. Harris tells her that he plans to claim his reward for the quest and buy groceries afterward. He invites her to come along with him, and she excitedly agrees. When Harris arrives at the guild, Jonathan gives him 8 silver coins despite the advertised reward being 4. Jonathan explains that the extra coins are a bonus for bringing back everyone's belongings and as an extra reward from Ted, Zoe, and Kampa. Harris is worried that the 3 men might complain, but Jonathan reassures him that he's already handled their complaints. Vanguards who abandon their rear guards don't deserve a full reward. He insists and tells Harris to accept the reward. He also heard that Harris selflessly gave Jenna his antidote. Jonathan jokes that if it were him, he wouldn't have handed over the antidote even if the other person begged for it. Tina, hearing this, gives Harris a death stare. Harris shuffles out of the guild and suggests that they go shopping already. Tina doesn't let him off the hook and asks him about his little poison incident. Harris tells her that he's fine and that's what matters, but she's upset that he claimed to have not been in any danger, believing that this is about her slave status. Harris promises to make the appropriate arrangements in the event that he dies. Tina tells him that this isn't about that. Tina continues to be in a foul mood even after arriving home. Harris can figure out how to disarm traps, but he can't figure out how a girl feels. Despite this, Harris can tell that Tina has prepared a rather extravagant meal. Suddenly, he hears two swift knocks on the door and recognizes a familiar voice coming from the other side. Tina offers to open it, but Harris opts to do it himself. As he opens the door, he comes face to face with a man who appears to be his complete opposite. He's got a white horse and everything. Harris and Z were once in the same party together before Harris bet his signature scruffy 5 o'clock shadow. Z recently announced his intentions to retire from being an adventurer, but because he had so many fans within the guild, everyone was in an uproar, especially the women. Harris asks Z what he plans to do after retiring, but Z has him promise not to laugh first. He leans in and whispers that he wants to be a holy knight. Harris laughs, even after promising not to. He explains that he doesn't find it funny. He just thought that it was a bigger deal. Harris thinks that Z aiming to be a holy knight is a wonderful idea, and he wholeheartedly encourages him to chase that dream without hesitation. He holds up a mug and wishes that Z would live his life without regrets. Z finishes retelling his story to Tina. Despite becoming a holy knight, he still often drops by to visit Harris. Tina is enamored by a tale from a bygone age. Harris asks Z what he came here to do, but Z replies that he doesn't need a reason to see his best friend. Still, Harris eyes him with suspicion. Z asks if Tina made the dish, and believing that it wasn't to his liking, she offers to make him another one. Z tells her not to bother. The steak is perfect. Harris tells Z to back off, suspecting that he wants Tina for himself, but Z swears that was not his intention. His only worry is that Tina won't be able to make much with Harris's meager earnings. He also jokingly asks if Harris is depending on illegal income. This is intended to drag Harris back to the capital if he found him still languishing in his antisocial and alcoholic ways. However, as of this moment, he's given up on that. He feels secure knowing that Harris and Tina are together. Harris feels as though Z is making it seem like he's the one being taken care of, but that's because Harris doesn't take care of himself at all. He can tell that Harris often makes Tina worry. Z suggests that Tina gets straight to the point with what she wants because Harris is one insensitive little vegetable. Harris remarks that Z has gotten even more brazen ever since he became a holy knight, but Z notes that a certain amount of brazenness is required to succeed as one. However, he has other reasons why he has to be brazen. It's because Harris won't listen to him otherwise. Harris would like to meet whoever this person is, and Z offers to hand him a mirror. He then tells Tina that this is how she should handle Harris. Z laughs and asks for seconds, and Tina happily leaves to fetch him some. Harris and Z laugh about the whole situation. After Z finishes his food, he mounts his horse, and before he leaves, he asks Tina to take good care of Harris. Tina nervously says that Z seems like a wonderful person. He asks her if she likes guys like Z, and she replies no. She was just playing along with Harris. Harris gives her a nice pat on the head. The moment they go back inside, Harris declares that he's going to sleep as dealing with Z made him indescribably exhausted. Tina returns to doing housework and asks Harris to tell her if he needs anything. Harris would prefer it if Tina rested now and left the work for later, but she reassures him that she got a lot of rest the night before. She urges him to go rest. Harris tells her to wake him up if he isn't up by dinner. He'd hate for the food to go cold. Tina cups her cheeks to psyche herself up for the chores ahead. After fetching some water from the well, Tina pours it into a wash basin and gets to work. She dutifully scrubs clothes and hangs them up to dry. But while washing Harris' underwear, she notices a tear on the backside and makes a mental note to tell him about it later. Harris wakes up a few hours later. Upon exiting his room, Tina approaches him with a worried look on her face. It's not about his underwear. They have to go out shopping again due to a lack of ingredients. Harris blames Z for eating so much when he visited. Harris remarks that he won't be able to accompany Tina like this forever, so she has to start learning how to read, write, and calculate. He knows that Tina is a quick learner, and he's confident that she can pick up these life skills quickly. His main issue is teaching her how to do those things in the first place. Suddenly, he hears someone yelling, "Get out!" As he turns the corner, he spots Gina in an intense argument with her landlord. Despite finally paying the rent, she was late on it. Gina's landlord kicks her out, saying that she's always late on her payments. He tells her to just give up on being an adventurer and kicks her out. Gina picks up her discarded belongings, all while grumbling about her landlord. When she looks up and sees Harris staring at her, she panics. She straightens her back and maintains as much dignity as she can muster, which isn't much. At a bar, Gina complains about her circumstances and her landlord, claiming that she already warned him in advance that she'd be late on her rent. A drunken Gina continues to ramble while Harris avoids her gaze. On the other hand, Tina's eyes wander to Gina's belongings. Tina sympathizes with Gina and says that the landlord went too far in throwing her luggage out. Gina reaches out to Tina, squeezes her cheeks, and remarks how she wants her to be her child. Harris reminds her that she doesn't have any money, which brings Gina back to reality. She didn't even have a place to sleep the night before. Harris asks her why she got kicked out in the first place, since her landlord's change of attitude must have been triggered by something. Gina refreshes Harris' memory of their 3 vanguards from yesterday, Zoe, Ted, and Kampa. Her landlord just so happens to be Zoe's uncle. It all falls into place after Gina reported their cowardice to the guild. Zoe likely told his uncle about Gina, prompting him to kick her out. Harris doesn't find it surprising that Zoe and his uncle would bear a grudge against her. However, Gina tells him that she isn't the only object of their grievances. It turns out that they also bear Harris quite a bit of ill will as well. The 3 of them were supposedly discovered in the middle of town, bubbling up from the poison from the snake bites. Harris laments that everything got out of hand so quickly. Gina adopts an "it is what it is" mentality and raises her mug to toast to Harris, her perfect companion. Tina also joins in, holding up her cup of juice. Tina asks Gina what she plans to do now, and she considers going to a different town. Gina finds there ways to abandon her side job in the city, but an adventurer's life is a fickle one. Harris asks Gina about her side job, and she explains that she acts as a tutor, teaching people how to read, write, and do a little magic. Thanks to this, she earns roughly 12 silver coins a month. Harris is surprised that she's homeless even though she earns such a respectable amount, but because they live so far from the capital, Gina has to pay higher prices for magic scrolls. He finds this a waste. He was hoping to find a tutor to teach Tina how to read and write. Gina says she'd be happy to, but without a place to live, she has no choice but to leave. Tina tugs on Harris's sleeve and suggests that he rent out his spare room to Gina instead. Gina is very reluctant to stay in what she thinks is a small, cooped-up room with a man, but Harris informs her that he has a full house with a separate spare room for her to use. He'll let Gina stay there for free on the condition that she teach Tina how to read and write. Gina considers his proposal and accepts. Tina happily starts affectionately calling Gina teacher. Gina thinks that she's exaggerating and prefers if Tina calls her by her first name instead. Tina is reluctant to do that herself, but Gina insists. Tina asks if she can call Gina her older sister instead, which Gina finds a bit embarrassing. Tina apologizes for the rudeness of her request, but Gina asks her first why she wants to call her that. Tina admits that she's always wanted an older sister, so Gina allows her to call her whatever she wants. Tina says Gina's name with the older sister honorific for the first time, which fills Gina's mind with a warm, flowery feeling. Harris hates to interrupt their little bonding session, but he informs Gina that her rent and her debt to him are 2 separate matters. Gina had secretly hoped that he would forgive the debt, but she promises to pay him back regardless. Tina smiles and hopes to work with Gina from now on, and so does Gina. Harris helps carry Gina's belongings back to his house. Gina is at a loss for words when she sees how massive Harris' house is. It was completely different from the image she had in mind, which makes her question how Harris could afford such a place. Tina heads in first to make some tea, leaving Harris to show Gina to her new room. Although the room is nice, it truly is an empty one. Harris tells her that she's lucky he didn't turn it into a storage room. Still, Gina finds living here a great deal easier than in her previous space. She takes a peek out the window and spots a well in Harris' backyard. However, she can't shake the feeling that this house seems to be too big for one person to live in. She asks Harris if his family is wealthy, as it would be difficult for a single adventurer from the countryside to afford such a large house. Nor does it feel like Harris' ideal house. He asks if he has to answer that, but Gina shakes her head. She was just curious about his circumstances, that's all. Tina quietly opens the door and informs them that tea is ready. Gina excitedly heads downstairs, telling Harris that the house is wonderful and thanking him for carrying her luggage. Gina's body relaxes as the piping hot tea does its work. She had forgotten what it was like for someone else to make her a cup of tea. She observes that Tina does all, if not the bulk, of the housework. She asks her if she made her apron herself, and Tina explains that she is simply using an apron that was originally here. Gina is a bit confused. The apron doesn't seem like something she would use. She can tell by the rough patchwork and adjustments that Tina isn't very good at sewing, so she offers to teach her how in exchange for Tina teaching her all about the house. Harris is happy for Tina. However, to teach her how to sew, Gina will need some materials. Harris urges them all to get some sleep for now. He asks Gina to sleep on the sofa, but Tina offers to sleep on the sofa instead, so that Gina can sleep on the bed, as there is only one. Harris looks away and braces himself for the worst. To confirm some details, Gina asks Tina where she usually sleeps if there is only one bed in the house. She innocently replies that she sleeps in the same bed as Harris. Gina looks at Harris like he's a bug scraped under the sole of her boot, but she remarks that she has no right to tell him how to treat his slaves. Harris swears that he's done nothing illegal. Gina informs Tina that men and women who aren't in a relationship don't normally sleep in the same bed. Tina didn't know that. Gina offers to sleep on the couch but invites Tina to do the same. As Gina settles in on the sofa, Tina asks Harris if it's really okay for Gina to sleep there. Harris reassures her that it is. Gina is an adventurer and has likely slept in worse places. More importantly, he urges Tina to get some sleep. Tina removes her earrings, carefully places them on the side table, and climbs into bed. After a few minutes spent trying to sleep, Tina asks Harris about Gina's earlier remarks that men and women don't usually sleep in the same bed. Tina claims to be perfectly fine with sleeping anywhere, but Harris reassures her that sleeping with her is special. Tina is a bit moved by this. Gina, who's been eavesdropping the whole time, can sleep soundly knowing that there's nothing to worry about. Harris tells Tina to get some sleep. Tina turns around, places her hand on Harris' back, and wishes him a good night. Harris smiles and wishes her the same. Tina sleeps in safety and comfort as a bright full moon illuminates the sky.